Yeah. Hi. Well, I'm Jaroslav Valuch, and I'm part of the crisis information team, which is part of the strategic communications department at the Czech Ministry of Interior. And yeah, that's what I'm focusing on: risk communication, crisis communication, and I've been focusing on these topics most of my career, communication with disaster-affected communities, but recently very much, looking also into media literacy and building resilience towards, false information, especially during crisis situations. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, the fresh news and the most important news for now is that we've developed and launched a comprehensive communication campaign around the 72 hours preparedness concept. That, those are those 3 days when people, should be ready to deal with the situation. I mean, not in life-threatening emergencies, the help will come, but the general situation like lack of water, lack of electricity, and internet off, people should be able to deal with that and enable the rescuers, to really focus on people who really need life-saving assistance. And we got inspired in Finland. We're inspired by the Finnish preparedness culture, by their handbook, and we're also got a lot of inspiration in Sweden, especially in the way the Swedes were preparing the handbook based on data and then collecting data after the distribution. So that's one source of inspiration. And otherwise, we really adopted it to the Czech context in many ways, the content, to make sure it reflects the specifics of this kind of Czech cultural specifics and others. And is also heavily based on experiences and guidance of the Czech fire brigades, who are the backbone of this kind of integrated response system in Czech Republic. And then our team, the crisis communication team, really brought in the experience that we collected over the 4 years that we exist, which is based on dealing with various crisis and tragic events in recent years, and our crisis communication response to that being, starting with violent interethnic escalations related to Ukrainian refugee crisis. We were coordinating the crisis communication response related to unprecedented mass shooting at the Charles University a few years ago, then the floods, recent blackout, and dozens of kind of local crisis situations that often luckily didn't make the news because they were prevented, or simply there was a way where we managed hand in hand with the local partners to handle them. And last point, I mean, that I would like to make is like really the breakthrough moment was the floods a year ago in Czech Republic that were massive. And immediately after the emergency stage, we started, trying to evaluate what happened, if our communication had an impact. And we had the luxury, unprecedented luxury, that the Czech Hydrometeorological Institute gave us 4-day prior warning that something really big is coming. And this was really great opportunity to kind of launch systematic risk and crisis communication to get people ready for what's coming.
Yeah, when you mentioned data, which is I think really interesting, is how did you use the data that you had to to develop what you've put together?
Right. So the good we really try to focus on like public polling and qualitative, conversations and interviews. And we've been collecting some public polls data on various topics for those 3 years already. So we do have, we do understand the different segments of the Czech population and their specific information needs. And I think the perspective, looking at it from this kind of service design perspective and information needs perspective, is very helpful because it really gives you a lot of space to design, different messaging and find the different channels. So the data are helping us in this, and they're helping us also now. Before we launched the campaign, we had pretty decent understanding of how people want or do not want to be instructed how to prepare, how they will perceive if the handbook arrives in their mailboxes, because there's going to be a distribution to 5 million households in the Czech Republic. That's going to be big. So this is how the data are helping. And then when the disaster happened, we already can kind of test how the different segments responded to our crisis communication and evaluate it based on those data and insights. Yeah. Well, so based on the feedback that we collected from the municipalities and from through public polling and other qualitative data collection, people did appreciate the communication campaign prior and during the floods, during the disaster. And it's clear that the severity of the impact of the disaster was lessened in a way because, people did manage to prepare because there was this luxury of a couple of days and hours to prepare. So they moved their furniture up upstairs. They followed the evacuation instructions. Not all of them. That's another story. And that's the question of trust. And but most people really did follow the instructions from the fire brigades, and that limited the impact. And yes, there were several deaths, but certainly not that many compared to some other floods of the same that had the same extent in the past years. Um, I mean, yes, it still left significant damage in the communities, and the some of the communities are still dealing with the impact even year after. But we do hope that at least there was some success in making the impact less severe. And maybe from another perspective, what's interesting that the harmful narratives and some false and misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories really didn't manage to make it into the mainstream. And we did an analysis also with our partners from Science Plus, and it looks like we really managed to strive them of the oxygen they need to spread, right? So we really try to kind of overpopulate the information space with the relevant information, and that these narratives remain on the margins. So that's hopefully also kind of good news. And the last thing, fresh thing, which we are really excited about, maybe hopefully proof of something that something was done right, is the fact that last week the crisis communication and risk communication around the Czech floods won the first prize at an award, Zlatý středník, which is the largest communication competition in the Czech Republic. So hopefully we did manage to do something at least better than was done in the past.
Yeah, and I think that issue of the oxygen of mis and disinformation is a really important one, and I often talk to people about kind of the amplification and messaging, and being able to do that, which is quite resource intensive as well. Did that what you found when you were that it took quite a lot of resources to keep putting those messages out?
Yeah, so I mean the most important really, the stage was the most important stage was before those 3 days before the disaster hit. So
Mm.
uh the communication was kind of really consistent and unified. All the relevant heads of different ministries, departments were speaking, very
Mm.
clearly to the population through the media, through the different channels, like, hey, this is not gonna be good. Get ready.
Mm.
I mean, we are doing this and that, so really it
Mm.
was coordinated communication effort. And obviously it generated because of the extremely low trust in the government and in institutions,
Mm.
it did generate some responses in a sense that like, oh, that's another COVID-like attempt to control us,
Yeah.
to kind of freak us out and everything. But really these narratives didn't really take hold simply because the reality arrived. And it
Right.
was clear that this was not just, to spread fear and unsubstantiated, but really the floods did came and arrive. So this was the debunking was quite easy in this sense, right?
Mm.
Because it was just like, look, it's here, right? But still, when we were looking in the different narratives, the most strong narrative was that the help that Czech Republic is providing to Ukraine was missing during the floods in the Czech Republic. There were some extreme versions of it that said like,
Mm.
the fire brigades, they donated all their helicopters and all the heavy equipment to Ukraine, and now
Yeah.
we don't have it. But then there were the softer ones, like, the money go to Ukraine, so the money are not here.
Yeah.
So, and these are the general narratives that, it's hard to address, and it doesn't make sense to address them in the middle of the emergency. In that case, you really need to focus on some of those kind of hoaxes that are spreading locally and that might create some really damage and might make people make bad decisions about their lives and their safety, right? So that's just one of the learnings about the different types of narratives and the different types of hazards that they bring, and the different types of urgency and responses they require. So, I mean, something that I'm going to be repeating probably many of the guidelines on the different handbooks, but it's really the key is taking this kind of human-centered design approach, right? So really looking at everything from the people's individual and family's perspective, what they need, what instructions and what emotions they need to feel to be confident that they are ready to get through some crisis situation and that they have all the necessary instructions and information to be well prepared. So that's the key, this kind of citizen perspective. And the inspiration for the 72 hours campaign, it really comes from the surveys after the floods, because it did show that people want to be instructed and that they realize they need to take some responsibility for handling certain situations themselves. I mean, it sounds obvious, but we have to remember that, our integrated rescue system works very well and excellently, and the trust in firefighters reaches 97%, right? Which is like really great. But people are understandably used to help arriving quickly and effectively. So we still need to address this kind of expectations that, everything works pretty well, so we don't need to do much. But changing this kind of feeling like, no, everybody, we have a shared responsibility for our security and our safety. And if we manage to get through the crisis on our own, if we're not in a life-threatening situation, really the rescue system can focus on the most vulnerable groups, individuals, and rescues that are needed. So, but we need to contrast this with this kind of extreme low trust in institutions and government, and so the crisis communication needs to kind of balance this conflicting trust realities. And if I may, maybe second kind of key principle that I would like to bring is this empowering approach. Again, it's not something that would be something new or groundbreaking, but actually our handbook opens with these words: in difficult times, we're able to help each other. When things are at their worst, we stand together. We're adaptable and resourceful. And then it goes on. And this sets the tone for the entire handbook, and actually the whole, way how we see things. Let's not address people as victims or potential victims or spreaders of fake news or whatever, but just let's empower them to make good decisions, and let's do as much as we can to equip them with information and deliver it in a way that it's easy to understand and actually reaches them. And maybe one more important thing during the approach that we are taking is really trying to focus a lot on vulnerable groups and really trying to identify the gaps in communication that needs to be filled so that the information really is delivered quickly to all the groups. Yeah, so this is for this. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. Yeah, well, so first of all, I would encourage the viewers and followers to check the handbook and the campaign itself. It's available in Czech language, English, Ukrainian, sign language, and there's going to be some more languages coming. So we'll share the link, I guess, somewhere. So you can check it out, how we approached it. Again, we need to adapt it a lot to the local context. There's some discussions going on, like, should we include also that people should buy water filters or not? So there are these detailed conversations. I'm sure everybody knows, these different nuances and discussions, but that's fine. But generally the feedback is good, is positive. And yeah, October is the next milestone because we'll be distributing the handbooks to all households in the Czech Republic. So that's going to generate another conversations, another wave of interest. So the firefighters established like a phone lines, so that people can actually call and consult and ask questions. So we're preparing a lot of media messaging around that to really make sure that people are not freaking out when it arrives in their mailboxes. We're designing communication to really work closely with nonprofit organizations and social workers to deliver the message upfront to the vulnerable groups that, this is going to happen, so that, they don't freak out, because they are very often left out of the kind of digital channels or any other channels. So that's the plan. And well, in general, I mean, we really try to approach everything through something that we call the polycrisis communication perspective, because as we see the polycrisis world these days, we believe that crisis communication principles should become the standard for the regular institutional communication in this kind of polycrisis world. And because we no longer have the luxury of like preparing for disaster or crisis, then responding to it and learning from it, and then waiting for another to come, right? It's just
Yeah.
like there are just too many crises going on at the same time on national, global, personal level. And instead of kind of panicking that we don't have the luxury of like, facing crisis one after another, let's take this as a baseline. That's the reality. Let's not get frustrated too much, and let's start building our communication strategies and tactics on those foundations. And well, this is what I feel like this is what the strategic communication these days should be about. And probably this is the only way how we can try to build trust with our audiences and with constituents and with citizens, not really focusing on building love brands, but really focusing on honest conversations and really, really high quality dialogue and communication, especially in crisis. So we would like to keep exploring this concept and turning it into practice. And we are, really open and more than happy to share our honest lessons learned and exchange experiences with anyone who kind of shares this vision.